This was about justice, and today justice has been served. Reminds me of, sabar ka phal meeta hote hai. Like
Oh, wow.
justice, requires patience, it requires persistence, but today justice has been served. When India wins, America wins. When America wins, India wins. And when we both win, the world wins. I always joke that Americans don't grow up bargaining for things. Indians, it's second nature. Whether it's a pack of crisps or whether it is the price of a rug or whether it's tariffs, Indians are excellent negotiators.
One of the biggest diplomatic moments for India when it comes to terror and 26/11 attacks has been the bringing of Tahawwur Rana to India. He will be facing the laws of India, laws of the land. But what really happened? How did it happen? Was it the Trump administration? Not really. We do know that the announcements for Rana extradition took place way before that. And the man who was dealing with it very, very closely is former US Ambassador to India, Ambassador Eric Garcetti. Thank you so much for joining us here on the India Today Network. Ambassador Garcetti, this is a major development when it comes to India-US terror cooperation. It took a lot of conversations, but also a lot of information, evidence that India had to provide. You were in the thick of it. This is not a purely Trump achievement or Trump administration achievement. That it started in Biden administration, not many people today are looking at.
Well, this is not a political achievement, Geeta, and it's great to be with you. This is an achievement for families who lost loved ones. This is an achievement against terrorism, which the United States and India, generation after generation, administration after administration, stand for together. And as someone who worked very hard on this extradition, this was not about politics. This was about justice. And today, justice has been served. Reminds me of, sabar ka phal meeta hote hai. Like
Oh, wow.
justice, requires patience, it requires persistence, but today justice has been served. And for the victims of 26/11 and a message to anybody who would terrorize innocent people, be they Indian or from anywhere, that the world and that democracies like ours stand against that terror, I think has been heard loud and clear.
Sabar ka phal meetha hota hai. That's very rightly put. It took us many, many years before we could actually get this Pakistani-Canadian national to come and testify here in India. But Ambassador Garcetti, in terms of the to and fro, in terms of what really transpired, if you could just tell us how difficult was it to navigate the space where you have a Canadian-Pakistani national who was acquitted in the 26/11 case, was convicted for plotting an attack on a Danish newspaper, but there was a political will to ensure that he pays the price for the acts done even in India.
That's exactly right, Geeta. And our FBI investigated and successfully was able to put together much of the evidence of crimes committed by Rana, and literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of our law enforcement officials and then our lawyers on both sides of the Indo-Pacific working together with two different systems so that the Indian prosecutors and Indian legal system could understand our system and the appeals that Rana was entitled to. Vice versa, us hearing from India what the promises were of an extradition. Those, I think, reflect just how far we've come and how closely aligned we are. If we had a picture of everyone who worked on this, not only were there politicians at the top, but really dedicated law enforcement officials, police officers, investigators, prosecutors, judges who were a part of making sure that this is airtight, because nobody wanted to see somebody escape from justice that for too long had not served justice. We were clear about that. Our Indian friends were clear about what they needed. And as two great friends, India and the United States together, working together, showed that terrorists cannot run, they cannot hide, they will face justice as long as they are on either of our countries if they ever come after one of our citizens.
That's very, very well put, Ambassador Garcetti. But in terms of the case itself, what was it that India really had to provide for, apart from the additional information? What are the specifics over here for America to recognize, acknowledge, and accept that Tahawwur Rana indeed is a man who is needed in India?
Well, clearly there was evidence that both of our law enforcement was able to share with each other things that we knew that maybe Indian investigators did not know, and obviously the strong case here from India of his connection to 2611. Then when the process occurred, oftentimes you can lose these extraditions if not all of the boxes are checked. The I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. And so we spent time with Indian officials so that they could understand the legal system and the appeals process, so that when his lawyer would try to say he hadn't faced due process or it hadn't been treated fairly, we together could provide that evidence to the judges that ultimately made that decision, and all the way up to our Supreme Court. This was something where Rana and his lawyers really exhausted every possible way of trying to avoid facing justice here, but he will face that. And then the last part is, before an extradition occurs, we have to just have the guarantees of making sure that somebody has the fair treatment within prison, access to medical facilities, etc., that meet the same standards of accused and of convicted criminals in the United States. That was matched, that was promised by India, and so the plane flight occurred, and Rana came here to Delhi on Thursday, so that finally a country, and again those victims' families that for so long have awaited this justice, can this weekend breathe a little bit more easy.
Ambassador Garcetti, I was just about to ask you about the plea. When he filed those appeals in court, he actually spoke about prison conditions over here, but he, in his last appeal, also went further to talk about Muslim persecution. We do know that, you've been dealing with it for a while. How did you deal with this with the Indian officials, knowing very well that there are certain standards under the extradition treaty as well that have to be met with, but also the fact that he used Muslim persecution as well over here?
Well, look, our judges have to look at this impartially, and we successfully were able to jointly make that case. And India was able to give the assurances that assured both our law enforcement prosecutors as well as our judges that those conditions would be made, that even the worst criminals have humane conditions that they deserve in humane and democratic societies like ours. And he would not be here today in Delhi if he hadn't met the satisfaction and the threshold of what the American standard is. And what that reflects is that India and the United States, we are imperfect democracies, we have challenges, we fall short. But when we get it together, we can do things right. We can ensure not only are there, of course, the rights for the accused and even for criminals, but most importantly, the rights for the victims, which for so long were essentially held hostage by process. And we were persistent, we were patient until today. We don't celebrate because this is obviously tragedy that came out of this. But again, we can at least finally feel the burden off our shoulders that for too many decades we have carried.
I remember you were one of the first ones to actually speak about this after the courts rejected his appeal, and you'd said that he'll be coming to India soon. You were not giving a time frame, but you did say he was coming to India. There's a judicial process underway. You can't speak much about it. But is it beyond just the judiciary? Was there this political will? Because he was indeed acquitted in the 2611 case, and yet he's here in New Delhi. So was there a lot of political will and political movement, so to say, behind ensuring that Rana returns? Or Rana is sent to India?
It was certainly a political priority for me as ambassador, for President Biden, I know for President Trump now and the current administration, as well as administrations before. But the nice thing about this is this wasn't politics. This was justice. This wasn't done as a favor. This wasn't done by cutting any corners, by breaking any rules. Everything to the letter was abided by, and the evidence was clear. And the day in court that he had and the many appeals that he had, each time were rejected. And so now I think we can all know that this wasn't just done because people felt that perhaps he was guilty or wanted to help a country that we love very much. This was done because we believe that Indians and all human beings deserve justice. And our system should help people across borders to achieve that even when people cross those borders.
Is there anything in the deal apart from sticking to the extradition treaty, wherein he has bargained his way through not to get capital punishment or some such, or is it absolutely clear that you go to India, you face the laws of the land?
No, the United States does have capital punishment for crimes like this, so that was not a request made by the United States. So he will face the Indian justice system. The review of the United States was comfortable that the conditions, the humane conditions of incarceration, access to the prisoner, and the potential consequences and sentencing met something that not only we were comfortable with, but that we could get behind and endorse. And that's why today he is sitting here in a prison in India, and why the Indian people can all believe that the justice system, not just in their own country, can work, but that it can work in the United States in support of Indian justice as well.
Ambassador Garcetti, was this a movement in its natural progression from Biden administration to the Trump administration in getting Tahawwur Rana to India, or was there something more that was added by the Trump administration for him to actually be sent back?
No, this was something that really doesn't have to do with any individual administration. We believe in this. We have worked on this in a professional way. We might have done the majority of the work, but it can't be finished without the help of this incoming administration. People always want to see the divisions of American politics. This is a moment when you see the unity of the American people and of a single voice, that we do back our Indian friends. We do back a justice system that takes terrorists and holds them accountable. So I think that victory has many mothers and fathers. Again, this is not a great day to celebrate because this comes out of tragedy, but it is one we can be proud of, and one that we can say spanned across different political parties, different countries, across these borders, in a unified voice that together terrorism should be obliterated from the face of the earth.
Okay, and the fact that there have been a lot of conversations regarding suspects of 2611, it was not just Tahawwur Rana, there was also David Coleman Headley. Is there anything that the Indian side worked on when you were ambassador at the US Embassy on Coleman Headley? Because he's already bargained a deal with the administration. Can we ever see him come to India?
I think, we will continue to listen to our friends here in India, their needs and the needs of the justice system. We don't just do this around terrorism. We do this around call centers and fraud. We do this with drug dealers and narco-terrorists. We do this with arms traffickers, human traffickers. So, for all of the listeners that are out there, as an ambassador, I witnessed just how incredibly beautiful that cooperation between our law enforcement agencies is. I think that America and India 30 years ago would have never imagined that we would have this close, not only level of cooperation, but really of care. Because we know victims, whether they're terrorist victims, like in the Headley case, whether they're a retired couple that has cheated out of their life savings from a call center, or whether it's a Mexican, narco-terrorist that is coming here to set up a fentanyl manufacturing facility that we're able to take down together. When India wins, America wins. When America wins, India wins. And when we both win, the world wins, because so many of these challenges really do ignore borders, aren't about a single country, but really are about attacks on innocent people everywhere.
Okay, you just said when India wins, America wins, and vice versa. But before I end this interview, Ambassador Garcetti, then what about the tariff wars that we are seeing? Do we see a win-win for both countries over here? Because it seems like things are going to get pretty tough for India should there not be a BTA, a bilateral trade agreement, sooner than later.
Well, I certainly hope so. And, I am always an optimist, but I think this is an amazing moment, Geeta, for the United States and India to come together. Some of the hard work we did in this previous administration, what this administration is very clear about with the Trump administration, let us find something that is not just about where we can fight. And we saw this, in the first Trump administration with tariffs that went up to protect steel and aluminum that we thought was unfairly being traded from here. India responded with things like, in my own home state of California, almonds and tariffs on agricultural products. I was very pleased to work on those and to settle those disputes together. But I always said our ambition should be greater. India and the United States should tie supply chains together. We should be able to counter the over-reliance on China for everything from pharmaceuticals to high-tech equipment, our defense and space futures. And I know that there's really good, robust conversations that we handed off to the Trump administration that they are elevating. And I would just say to my Indian friends, this is a moment not to get upset, but to bargain, to sit down. And there's a lot of trust between our people. There's a lot of trust between our leaders across different administrations. And now there's a 90-day breathing period. I would love to see the US and India be the first place where you see a breakthrough and something that isn't just about this moment and fairness, but really investing in the future of our supply chain so that the technologies that define the 21st century can be jointly manufactured with the lowest tariff and fairest tariff levels on both sides of the Indo-Pacific.
I do agree with you that the time for tariff reforms in India was yesterday, but would you agree with the method? That should this have been the way that India would or should have been pushed into reforming its tariff?
I always joke that Americans don't grow up bargaining for things. Indians, it's second nature, whether it's for a pack of crisps or whether it is the price of a rug or whether it's tariffs. Indians are excellent negotiators, and I think Americans are learning to. But sometimes blunt talk helps in negotiations I've had, whether it's with a chaiwala or whether it's with somebody else here in India. And my hope is that the blunt talk of this administration, which I do think reflects the fair claims of many administrations who have said tariffs can be too high. That doesn't just hurt American jobs, but it hurts Indian manufacturing. How can we get to a place where we see the lowering of those tariffs and a frictionless relationship where maybe a component that's made in the United States for a computer gets assembled here without being taxed and then sold in the world, and we both win? Jobs are created in the United States and in India, where Indian companies invest in the US because they can create local jobs in America, just as American companies do here. What's to dislike about that? And if blunt talk gets us to the table, if a little bit of some knots in our stomach helps move forward, I think we'll look back and say, it's good that we took advantage of the situation. And like I said, I'm optimistic that can be accomplished, not only because we started those sort of conversations, but certainly the recent few days have elevated the importance of trying to come together rather than move apart.
Ambassador Eric Garcetti, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Network.
Great to be with you, Geeta. Thanks.